I found a hidden camera inside my own home while bleeding the furnace before winter. It was disguised as a USB charger, plugged low into the power strip behind my desk, the kind of spot you never look at twice once it's there. The device was warm, not from the furnace heat. The basement stays cold in October, warm from transmitting. At 67 years old, who in the world would need to watch everything I do inside my own house? To find out, I unplugged it without a word, drove it to a truck stop outside Owen Sound, and handed it to an old friend heading west. 48 hours later, my daughter's phone wouldn't stop ringing. When I saw her face go pale through the kitchen window, I already knew. Let me back up. Every October, same week, I go through the house the way I was trained. 31 years as a civil engineer teaches you to inspect systems before they fail, not after. I check the roof drainage, the sump pump, the water softener, and I bleed the furnace lines before the first freeze hits Georgian Bay. It's not exciting work. It keeps the house standing. My wife Linda used to say I treated our home like a construction site. She wasn't wrong. She's been gone 4 years now, and I still do it the same way. Same clipboard, same checklist, same order. I was on item 7 checking the power strip behind my office desk for overloaded circuits when I saw it. A small white block, maybe the size of a matchbox, plugged into the bottom row. It looked like a phone charger adapter, except I hadn't put it there, and it had no charging cable attached. I crouched down and looked closer. A pinhole lens no bigger than a shirt button faced outward toward my desk, toward my computer monitor, toward the filing cabinet where I keep the property documents. I didn't touch it. I stood up, left the basement, and went to make tea. My engineering brain doesn't panic. It catalogs. I stood at the kitchen window looking out at the bare birch trees along the property line and thought about who had been in that basement in the last 3 months. My son-in-law had helped me move some old boxes down there in August. Said he wanted to free up the guest bedroom closet. My daughter had come with him and stayed upstairs the whole time. He'd been alone in that basement for almost 20 minutes. I thought about the other things he'd done to help over the past year. He'd set up my new router in March, spent nearly an hour configuring it himself, said the instructions were confusing. He'd updated my laptop in June, patched the operating system, said there were security vulnerabilities I needed to fix. He'd offered 3 times to help me organize my financial files. I'd always said no to that one. He'd kept offering. I drank my tea. I went back downstairs. I photographed the device from 4 angles, using my phone. Zoomed in on the model number on the side. Then I took a paper towel from the shelf, wiped my fingerprints from the surface, and unplugged it. I placed it in a Ziploc bag, set it on the workbench, and finished bleeding the furnace. No reason to let the pipes freeze while I figured this out. That evening, I searched the model number on my phone, not my laptop, my phone. The results came back immediately. It was a wireless micro camera. Continuous recording, motion activated, streams to an app in real time. Range, unlimited with Wi-Fi. Storage, cloud-based. Whoever installed it had been watching my home office remotely, from anywhere, at any time. I set the Ziploc bag in my top desk drawer and closed it. I didn't call my daughter. I didn't call my son-in-law. I did what I learned in 31 years of solving structural problems. Stop moving and watch the system react. The next 3 days, I stayed out of the home office entirely. Used my phone for everything. Let the desk sit untouched, the filing cabinet closed, the monitor dark. Normal behavior for a man who spends his October outdoors doing yard work before the snow comes. Nothing suspicious about that. I raked leaves along the back fence, stacked firewood, patched the dock before it went into storage. I gave whoever was watching the camera nothing to see. On the 3rd day, my daughter called. She has a particular voice she uses when she's trying to sound casual. I've known it since she was 16. She called it just checking in. She asked how I was feeling, whether my hip was bothering me, whether I'd been sleeping. Then, almost as an afterthought, "Have you been spending much time in your office, Dad? Just wondering if you've been keeping up with your paperwork." Your paperwork. She'd never asked about my paperwork in her life. "Not much," I said. "The weather's been good. I've been outside mostly." "Oh." A pause. "Everything okay with your accounts and things?" "Fine," I said. "Why?" "No reason. Just making sure you're on top of things. You know how it is." I did know how it was. I said goodbye and hung up. She called again 2 days later. Different questions, same undercurrent. Had I looked at my RRSP recently? Had I talked to anyone at the bank? Was I thinking about updating my will? I told her my RRSP was exactly where I'd left it, and that I'd let her know if anything changed. She laughed, too quickly, and said she was just being caring. I opened the desk drawer and looked at the Ziploc bag. That night I drove to Pete's place, 2 properties down the road. Pete is 73, a retired OPP officer, and the only person in a 5-kilometer radius I trust without condition. We've shared fence lines and firewood and the particular silence of men who've both buried their wives and kept living. I knocked on his door at 8:30. He opened it in his housecoat, took one look at me, and said, "Come in." I showed him the bag. He turned it over in his hands, said nothing for a moment. "You know what this is." "I know what it is." "You touch it with your hands?" "Paper towel." He nodded, handed it back. "What do you need?" I needed his computer. He asked no other questions. I sat at his kitchen table and searched the camera manufacturer's cloud service. The device required an account to stream footage. I searched for any records of the serial number in Canadian consumer databases, found a purchase link through a third-party electronics reseller, paid in cryptocurrency. No name, no address. Whoever bought it knew how to stay invisible. Then I searched something I'd been putting off. I searched my daughter's husband's name in debt and loan in Ontario. I didn't find much, but I found enough. A small business he'd started 3 years ago had been dissolved. A limited company, real estate consulting, incorporated, and then quietly wound down 18 months later. I found his name on a civil court filing from earlier that year, a creditor action, a numbered company pursuing an unpaid balance. The amount wasn't listed publicly, but the filing existed. I thanked Pete and walked home through the cold. The following morning I called Gary Ashworth. Gary and I have been friends since the late 90s when he was running aggregate deliveries to my construction sites. He retired his own rig 2 years ago, but still drives part-time for a nephew's freight company. Last I'd heard, he was doing a run out to Vancouver before the mountain passes got difficult. He answered on the second ring, gravel in his voice from a lifetime of early mornings. "Arthur, what time is it?" 6:30. "I need a favor, Gary." "Must be serious. I need something to travel west with you." "All the way to the coast." Silence. I could hear his coffee maker going. "What kind of something?" "Not dangerous. Not illegal. I just needed a long way from here for a while." He knew me well enough not to ask further. We'd helped each other through harder things than unusual requests. We met at the truck stop on Gray Road 18 at 6:45. The sky was still gray, the parking lot empty except for a row of rigs idling in the cold. I handed him the Ziploc bag tucked inside a small cardboard box, taped shut, no labels. He turned it over once. "You going to tell me what's in it eventually?" "Probably." He put it behind the seat. "I'll text when I'm past Wawa." I watched his truck pull out onto the highway heading north toward the Trans-Canada. Then I drove home and started waiting. The text came that evening. "Past Wawa, heading west. Package safe." I replied, "Thank you." I made dinner, cleaned the kitchen, went to bed early. At 9:15 my phone rang. My daughter. I let it go to voicemail. She left none. At 9:40 she called again. This time I answered. "Dad." Her voice was tight. "I'm here." "Where are you?" "Are you home?" "I'm in my kitchen. Where else would I be?" Have you been out at all today?" I set down my glass slowly. "I went to the truck stop this morning, picked up a coffee." "Why?" Silence on her end. Then, muffled, her husband's voice in the background, asking something I couldn't make out. "Dad, I think we should come out this weekend. There are some things we should talk about." "What kind of things?" "Just family things. Important ones." "Can we come Saturday?" "Of course," I said. "The door's always open." She said goodnight and hung up. I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. She hadn't asked how I was feeling. She hadn't mentioned the hip or the sleep or anything she'd asked about the week before. She'd asked where I was. And she'd sounded frightened when I couldn't account for my movements. That meant she'd been watching my location. And now I was 4,000 kilometers from where I was supposed to be. I left the kitchen light on and walked to my office. I sat at the desk for a minute without touching the laptop. My son-in-law had spent an hour on this machine in June. He'd patched the operating system, he'd said. Security vulnerabilities. I opened the task manager my son-in-law had shown me that, ironically, during one of his earlier visits, I went through the running processes carefully. I recognized most of them. One I didn't, svhost remote.exe. It was listed under startup applications. I wrote the name down on paper, closed the laptop without touching anything else, and walked to Pete's. It was 10:30. He opened the door without complaint. I searched the process name on his computer. The first result told me everything. Remote desktop access software. It allowed someone to view a screen in real time, access files, move through folders, read open documents from anywhere with an internet connection. I checked the installation date on Pete's machine by looking up how to find it without opening my own laptop. Installed in June, the same week my son-in-law had patched the system. I searched what files a remote user could access. Everything. Anything open or recently opened. Bank statements. Legal correspondence. Scanned documents. Passwords stored in the browser. My entire financial life, laid out for someone to read from a Toronto apartment. I asked Pete to check one more thing. Under Ontario's Substitute Decisions Act, could someone file a power of attorney for property using a forged signature? He looked at me steadily. Not legally, he said, but it happens. I thanked him and went home. I didn't sleep. I made notes in a paper notebook, not on the laptop, and I thought about my son-in-law, about the business that had failed, about the creditor filing, about 18 months of helpful visits and updated routers and fixed laptops, about my daughter's voice on the phone, tight and afraid. At 2 a.m, I called Helen Crawford. Helen handled my wife's estate, and she's been my lawyer for 12 years. I left a message asking her to check, first thing in the morning, whether any power of attorney documents had been submitted in my name. I told her it was urgent. She called back at 8:15. Arthur, sit down. I was already at the kitchen table with my coffee. 6 weeks ago, a notary office in Barrie received a durable power of attorney for property with your signature. The notary flagged it. The supporting ID had inconsistencies. The photo didn't match the file photo they had on record from a previous document. They put it on hold and filed a query. I tried to reach you but couldn't get through. She paused. I should have tried harder. What would the POA have given them? Full control. The property, the accounts, your pension, medical decisions, everything. And the property itself? Has anyone tried to use it as collateral? A longer pause this time. I was about to get to that. 3 weeks ago, a private lending company received a mortgage application using your property as security. The title company ran a check and found the ownership was not in dispute, but the application signature didn't match your notarized signature on file from the original purchase. They contacted me 2 days ago. I hadn't reached you yet. Her voice tightened. Arthur, the loan amount was $280,000. The number sat in the room like something physical. Who's the lender? A company called North Shore Capital Investments, incorporated federally. They operate out of a Bay Street address, but there's nothing on their public filings that looks clean. Interest rates in the application were 31% annually. Arthur, that's not a lending company. That's a collection operation. My son-in-law owes them. Silence. I suspected as much when I saw the property address. How long before they come looking? At that interest rate, with whatever arrears have accumulated days, a week at most. I thanked her and asked her to document everything. Then I called a man I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Don Rideout, retired detective, Durham region, 30 years on the job before his knees gave out. We'd been in the same curling league for a decade, he answered on the 4th ring. Arthur Morrison, what's wrong? I need everything you can find on my son-in-law. Finances, associations, who he owes. By tomorrow, if possible. A pause. Your daughter know you're calling me? No. All right. He asked for the name, the address, the business that had been dissolved. Give me until morning. He called back at 6:45 the next day. I was already up. Arthur, it's bad. Tell me. He borrowed heavily, starting about 2 years ago. Crypto losses, then a real estate partnership that collapsed when rates went up. He's into North Shore for $260, plus accumulated interest closer to $300 now. They've been patient because he told them he had access to a property asset, a rural lakefront in Grey County. My property. He told them he was arranging a legitimate refinancing. They gave him 60 days. That was 7 weeks ago. What do they do when people don't pay? Don's voice went flat the way it does when he's not editorializing, just reporting. They've been investigated twice by the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit. They operate alongside a collections subsidiary that uses intimidation. They've had 2 civil suits from borrowers who claim physical coercion. Nothing proven. Arthur, these aren't patient people. And they have a file on your property. How much time? A week. Maybe less. And there's something else. He hesitated. My source says someone drove past your property last Thursday and took photographs. Exterior, the dock, the outbuildings. Someone assessed the value in person. I looked out the kitchen window at the property Linda and I had built over 30 years. Don, I need to record a confession. What do I need in Ontario? One-party consent province. You're a party to the conversation, you can record it. You need him to say 3 things clearly. That he installed or arranged for surveillance in your home. That he knew what the devices could capture, and that he intended to use your property or your signature. That covers fraud, breach of trust, and elder financial abuse under the criminal code. I wrote the 3 points down, and if I bring the RCMP a recording, combined with your lawyer's documentation and the camera device, Arthur, that's a strong file. Call the Collingwood detachment. Ask for the financial crimes intake line. I thanked him and sat with the notepad in front of me for a long while. That afternoon I drove to Barrie. I bought 4 small security cameras from a hardware store, paid cash, and picked up a prepaid laptop from a wireless carrier kiosk. Nothing linked to my name, nothing that could be accessed remotely. I drove home, installed the cameras over the course of 2 careful hours. One in the living room behind the bookcase Linda always kept full. One in the kitchen above the window ledge where the clay pots sit. One covering the front entrance from inside the coat closet, angled through the louvered door. And one in the hall outside my office. All 4 streamed only to the prepaid laptop, which I kept in the locked drawer of the guest room dresser. The compromised laptop I left on my desk exactly as it had been, dark, closed, untouched. At 4 o'clock I called Helen and told her what I had and what I needed. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, I'll have everything documented and ready for the RCMP by end of day. Do you want me to call the detachment, or will you? I will. The officer who took my call was Corporal Singh from the Grey Bruce Financial Crimes Intake. I gave her the summary in order. Camera, spyware, attempted POA, fraudulent mortgage application, connection to North Shore Capital. She asked several precise questions. At the end she said, Mr. Morrison, can you give us access to your property Saturday morning with recorded consent from the other parties present? That's exactly what I'm offering. We'll have plainclothes officers there by 8:30. They'll stay out of sight until you have what you need. If things become unsafe, we come in immediately. They won't become unsafe, I said. He's not violent. He's desperate. There's a difference. She agreed to be there. That evening I called my daughter. Saturday works, I said. Come for 10. I'll put coffee on. She said they'd be there. Her voice was the voice I'd known her whole life, not the careful, managed one she'd been using on the phone lately, but the one underneath it. She sounded tired. She sounded afraid. And for a moment I felt the full weight of what Saturday was going to mean. Not just for me, but for her, for the years after, for every phone call that wouldn't happen and every birthday that would be different. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. Friday night I didn't sleep. I went through the 3 points Don had given me, worked through how to reach each one naturally in conversation, practiced in the bathroom mirror until the words felt steady. I checked the camera feeds at midnight, again at 3, again at 6. The property sat quiet under the first light frost of the season. At 8:15 Saturday morning, a gray Jeep pulled onto the far edge of the laneway and parked behind the equipment shed. 2 plainclothes officers, 1 man, 1 woman, walked calmly to the side door. I let them in, showed them the kitchen layout, and they positioned themselves where they'd be out of sight but able to hear everything clearly. Corporal Singh looked at me before she stepped back. Take your time, she said. Don't rush it. At 10 o'clock exactly, my son-in-law's truck crunched on the gravel. My daughter came in first. She looked thinner than the last time I'd seen her. My son-in-law followed, hands in his pockets, eyes moving around the room in a way he was trying to control. I poured coffee. I set out cups. I sat across from them at the kitchen table, the same table Linda and I had eaten at for 30 years. "I found something in the basement," I said. My daughter's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. "A camera, behind my desk. Someone put it there to watch my home office." I kept my voice even, plugged into the power strip, streaming over Wi-Fi. My son-in-law said nothing. His jaw tightened. "I also found remote access software on my laptop, installed in June, the night you updated the operating system." I looked at him directly. It gave someone access to everything on that machine. My accounts, my pension statements, the property deed, my correspondence with my lawyer. My daughter set her cup down. Her hands were not steady. "I know about North Shore Capital," I said. "I know about the $280,000 loan. I know my property was offered as collateral without my knowledge or consent. And I know someone tried to file a power of attorney in my name 6 weeks ago with a forged signature." My son-in-law stood up. "Sit down," I said. "Please." He sat. My daughter said very quietly, "Dad, let him talk," I said. He looked at the table. His voice when it came out was almost unrecognizable. "We were going to pay it back, I swear. Once there was an opportunity. It went wrong. Everything went wrong at once, and by the time I understood how bad it was." "Did you install that camera?" He didn't answer immediately. My daughter looked at him. He closed his eyes. "Yes." "Did you install the remote access software on my laptop?" "Yes." "Did you know that my property was being used as collateral on a loan you took out without my consent?" "I thought I was going to tell you. I kept saying I was going to tell you, and then more time passed, and..." His voice broke. "I couldn't ask you for help. I couldn't tell you what I'd done. So you decided to take it." He didn't answer. That was its own answer. My daughter had both hands flat on the table. Her voice was very controlled. "He didn't forge the signature." "Dad, I did." She looked up at me. "I thought if we could just get the POA through, we could buy enough time to fix it before you ever found out. I thought we could put everything back before you were affected. I know how that sounds. It sounds like you made a decision about my life without asking me." "Yes," she said. "It does. I need you to understand something." I looked at them both. "There are officers in this house. RCMP. They've heard this conversation. That wasn't a plan I came to easily." My son-in-law's head came up sharply. My daughter went very still. Corporal Singh stepped into the kitchen. Her colleague came in from the hall. They identified themselves. My son-in-law stared at me across the table, not with anger that surprised me, with something closer to relief. The way a man looks when the thing he's been dreading has finally arrived, and the waiting is over. My daughter didn't look at the officers. She looked at me. Her eyes were full of something I couldn't completely name. Not rage, grief, maybe. The same grief I was feeling. The kind that comes from losing something that already happened, not something happening now. They were cautioned and taken out. My son-in-law walked without resistance. My daughter paused at the door and looked back, and I held her eyes for a moment, and then she was gone. The house was very quiet. I washed the coffee cups. I folded the dish towel over the oven handle the way Linda always did, right side over left. Then I sat at the kitchen table and stayed there until the light changed. 7 months passed the way time passes when you're rebuilding a life that was altered without your permission, slowly, and then, without noticing, less slowly. The criminal proceedings took time. My son-in-law entered a guilty plea on 3 counts. Fraud over $5,000, unauthorized use of a computer, and breach of trust. He received a conditional sentence of 22 months to be served in the community under strict supervision, and was ordered to repay the full balance of the loan from his own assets. The judge noted his cooperation with the RCMP investigation into North Shore Capital. His testimony helped establish a clear pattern of predatory lending and weighted the sentence accordingly. He lost the condo. He lost what remained of the business. He started over from a different floor than he'd been on before. My daughter's case was harder. She had forged a legal document with intent to gain control of another person's property. The Crown took it seriously. She received 15 months less a day, served in the community, 200 hours of community service, and 3 years of probation. The forged POA was voided. At sentencing, she made a statement. "I didn't attend. Helen was there and told me afterward that she'd said she understood what she'd done and that she wasn't asking for my forgiveness, only that I know she was sorry. Helen said she'd looked composed. I was glad of that. North Shore Capital Investments was raided by RCMP Financial Crimes 6 weeks after the arrest. 11 people were charged with various offenses under the Criminal Code and the federal financial statutes. The firm's accounts were frozen. My property was formally cleared of any claim in a straightforward legal proceeding that took less than an afternoon. I transferred the deed into an irrevocable trust the following month. Helen handled it. I signed the papers at her office in Owen Sound on a Tuesday morning in February with snow coming down outside the window. That spring I got a dog. A 4-year-old shepherd cross from the Humane Society in Barrie. A quiet, serious animal who'd been overlooked because he wasn't a puppy and didn't perform for visitors. I named him Cedar. He follows me around the property on my October inspections now, sits beside me when I check the power strip behind the desk, watches the door when I'm on the phone. Good company. The kind that doesn't require explanation. I joined a support group through a seniors organization in Collingwood that deals with elder financial abuse. I go once a month. I've given 2 talks at community centers in the area, one in Meaford and one in Thornbury, about early warning signs. After the Meaford talk, a man named Ronald, 71, former railway engineer, found me in the parking lot and told me his stepdaughter had been asking unusual questions about his investment accounts. He asked if he was overreacting. I told him he wasn't. I gave him Helen's number and Dawn Rideouts. 3 weeks later, he called to tell me he'd found remote monitoring software on his desktop. He'd already contacted his bank. It felt like something. It felt like a reason. My daughter wrote to me in April. A real letter, on paper, 3 pages in her handwriting. She didn't ask for anything. She explained things I already mostly knew, how the losses had compounded, how fear had replaced judgment, how she'd told herself it wasn't really wrong because she'd intended to fix it before it cost me anything. She said she understood now that the intention didn't change the act. She said she was in counseling. She said she was not the same person she had been, and she hoped that was worth something, and if I never wanted to hear from her again, she would understand that too. I read the letter 3 times. I folded it and put it in the desk drawer. I haven't written back yet. I'm not sure I'm ready to. I'm not sure what ready means in this situation, or whether it arrives all at once or in increments you don't notice until one day you pick up a pen. Maybe. Someday. Not yet. Cedar was asleep at my feet when I finished reading. The bay was visible through the window, the water flat and gray and enormous the way it gets in spring before the light comes back properly. I thought about the woman at the Thornbury talk who'd asked me afterward whether she was wrong to love her son even after what he'd done. I'd told her that love and accountability weren't opposites, that you could hold both, that holding both was in fact harder than choosing one. I still believe that. People ask me if I have regrets. I tell them the truth. I regret that it happened. I don't regret what I did about it. Those are different things. And it took me a while to understand they could both be true at the same time. I didn't want to be vindicated. I didn't want to be right. I wanted to sit at my kitchen table without wondering who was watching. I wanted to walk to my dock in the morning without calculating who knew my schedule. I wanted to own my own life again, not the life I had before. That's gone, but this one. The one that's left. On my terms. With my dog and my property and whatever time remains. That's not revenge. That's not even justice, not entirely. It's simpler than that. It's just survival. And survival, I've learned, is something you owe to yourself before you owe anything to anyone else. If you're watching this and something feels wrong, a question that's too specific, a favor that comes with too much access, a visit that leaves you uneasy for reasons you can't quite explain, trust that feeling. Document what you can. Get a lawyer before you need one. Talk to someone outside the situation. And remember that protecting yourself is not a betrayal of the people who should have protected you first. If any part of this story stayed with you, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'd like to know how far this is reaching. If you know someone who needs to hear it, share it with them. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the stories that follow. Thank you for being here and for listening all the way through.